The night was deep and silent. In the presidential palace of Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat hunched over his desk, surrounded by mountains of paperwork, reports, and matters of state scattered in disarray around him. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on his shoulders, manifesting in the exhaustion that clouded his eyes. For weeks he had been working tirelessly, often through the night, managing the complex affairs of Burkina Faso. But tonight, fatigue finally overwhelmed him, forcing him to surrender to the heaviness of his eyelids. He leaned back in his chair, telling himself he would rest for just a few moments. As his eyes closed and consciousness slipped away, a dream seized him with unexpected intensity. It was not the usual fragmented imagery of sleep, but something vivid and terrifyingly real. In the dream, he found himself standing at the beginning of a long, desolate road. Dense jungle pressed in from both sides, the trees forming an impenetrable wall of darkness. The road stretched endlessly before him, and at its far end, barely visible in the distance, stood an old border post. A sickly yellow light flickered from a single bulb, casting eerie shadows across the scene. Next to the post sat an aging refrigerator truck, its white paint peeling and rusted. Something about the truck filled Ibrahim with deep unease. As if compelled by an invisible force, he moved toward it, his feet carrying him forward against his will. The closer he got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew thick and cold, carrying with it a smell he couldn't quite identify, but that filled him with dread. When he finally reached the truck, his hand trembled as it grasped the door handle. The metal was ice cold beneath his palm. He pulled the door open, and what he saw inside would haunt him forever. The interior of the truck was filled with frozen bodies, wrapped in white cloth like shrouds. They were young people, boys and girls barely out of their teens. Their faces were visible through the thin fabric, frozen in expressions of terror and desperation. Their eyes, though lifeless, seemed to stare directly at him, pleading for help that had come too late. Some appeared to have died, reaching out, their arms extended as if trying to escape their frozen tomb. Then, cutting through the silence, came a voice. It was deep and resonant, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Ibrahim," it said, each word heavy with judgment, "if you remain silent, this crime will never end. These children are counting on you. Their blood will be on your hands if you do nothing." Ibrahim jolted awake, his heart pounding violently in his chest. Cold sweat covered his forehead and soaked through his shirt. He looked around wildly, momentarily disoriented, before recognizing his familiar office. But the images from the dream remained vivid, burned into his mind with frightening clarity. His hands were shaking, and he realized with absolute certainty that this was no ordinary dream. It was a warning, a call to action that he could not ignore. Without hesitation, he stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor in the silent room. "We're going to the border," he announced to the empty office, his voice firm despite the lingering fear. He glanced at the clock on the wall, 3:00 a.m. Most of the city was asleep, but Ibrahim knew that evil never rested, and neither could he. Within minutes, the palace came alive with activity. Guards rushed to their posts, drivers started vehicles, and soldiers assembled in formation. Word spread quickly. The captain was mobilizing for an emergency mission. No one questioned why or where. They had learned to trust Ibrahim's instincts. His leadership had saved countless lives before, and they would follow him anywhere. Ibrahim pulled on his military jacket, the fabric still warm from where it had hung near the heater. He laced his boots tightly, checked his sidearm, and whispered a prayer under his breath. "In the name of Allah, guide us to what we seek." Then he strode out of his office, his bearing commanding and purposeful, every inch the leader his country needed. The convoy of military vehicles moved through the sleeping city like a serpent, headlights cutting through the darkness. As they left the urban area behind, the landscape transformed into something more primal and forbidding. The jungle pressed close to the road, ancient trees creating a canopy that blocked out even the faint starlight. The atmosphere inside the vehicles was tense. Soldiers checked their weapons repeatedly, a nervous habit that revealed their unease. They didn't know what they were heading toward, but the captain's urgency had infected them all with a sense of impending discovery. Ibrahim sat in the lead vehicle, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, but his mind replaying the dream over and over. Every detail had been so precise. The yellow light, the refrigerator truck, the location of the border post. It couldn't be mere coincidence. He had always been a rational man, guided by logic and evidence, but he also recognized that sometimes knowledge came from unexpected sources. Whether this was divine intervention, his subconscious piecing together fragments of intelligence reports, or something else entirely, he knew he had to investigate. The journey took over 2 hours. As they drove, Ibrahim reflected on recent reports that had crossed his desk. There had been whispers of young people disappearing from villages, promised jobs in Malaysia or Gulf countries, never to be heard from again. Families had been filing missing persons reports with increasing frequency. The authorities had assumed these were typical cases of illegal immigration. Tragic, certainly, but not uncommon in a region plagued by poverty. But what if there was something more sinister at play? What if these disappearances were connected to something organized, something evil? As dawn began to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink, the border post finally came into view. Ibrahim's breath caught in his throat. It was exactly as he had seen in his dream. The yellow light still flickering despite the approaching sunrise, the isolated location surrounded by dense forest, even the configuration of the buildings. And there, parked near the checkpoint, was the refrigerator truck. The border guards on duty snapped to attention as the convoy arrived, clearly shocked to see the captain himself at this remote location. Their commanding officer hurried forward, saluting crisply. "Sir, we weren't expecting you. Is there a problem?" Ibrahim's eyes never left the refrigerator truck. "Tonight something extraordinary will happen," he said quietly. "I want every vehicle that crosses this border thoroughly inspected. No exceptions, no matter who they claim to be or what documents they carry." The guards exchanged glances, but immediately began setting up a more thorough checkpoint. Additional barriers were erected, inspection equipment was brought out, and the atmosphere shifted from routine border monitoring to something far more serious. They didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, the refrigerator truck began to move, its engine starting with a cough and a rumble. The driver, a thin man with nervous eyes, began maneuvering toward the checkpoint. As the truck approached, the border guards signaled for him to stop. Even from a distance, Ibrahim could see that something was wrong. The driver's hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, his knuckles white with tension. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool morning air. "Papers," demanded one of the guards. The driver fumbled in his jacket, producing a worn passport and some shipping documents. His hands were shaking so badly that he dropped the papers twice before successfully handing them over. "I'm just transporting meat," he stammered, his voice high and strained. "Frozen meat for the markets in Ouagadougou. It's all legal, all documented." The guard examined the papers, which appeared to be in order, if somewhat suspicious in their pristine condition. Too new for a truck and driver that looked so weathered. "Open the back," the guard ordered. Standard inspection. The color drained from the driver's face. "That's not necessary," he protested, his voice rising in panic. "The seal is intact. I can't break the cold chain or the meat will spoil. My employer will—" "Open it now," Ibrahim commanded, stepping forward. His voice carried the full weight of his authority. "This is not a request." The driver looked wildly around, as if considering running, but he was surrounded by armed soldiers. Realizing he had no choice, he slowly climbed down from the cab and walked to the rear of the truck on trembling legs. He made a show of searching for keys, clearly stalling, but eventually produced a ring of keys from his pocket. His hands shook so violently that he struggled to fit the key into the lock. Finally, the lock clicked open. 2 soldiers stepped forward and hauled the heavy door wide. Immediately, a blast of frigid air rushed out, carrying with it a smell that made several of the guards step back in revulsion. It was the unmistakable odor of death, sweet, sickly, and overwhelming despite the cold that should have contained it. When the soldiers shined their flashlights inside, a collective gasp went up from the assembled men. The interior of the truck was indeed filled with frozen bodies, just as Ibrahim had seen in his dream. But the reality was even more horrifying than the vision. There were at least 25 young people, their bodies wrapped in thin white cloth that did nothing to obscure the agony frozen on their faces. They had died in terror, some with their mouths open in silent screams, others curled into fetal positions as if trying to protect themselves from the cold that had ultimately killed them. Several of the younger soldiers turned away, unable to look. Some vomited. Even the most hardened veterans felt tears sting their eyes. These weren't just bodies. They were someone's children, someone's hopes and dreams, reduced to frozen cargo. Ibrahim stood perfectly still, his face a mask of controlled fury. He walked closer to the truck, forcing himself to look at each face, to bear witness to their suffering. One girl couldn't have been more than 16, her face still round with youth. A boy near the front had a prayer bead bracelet frozen to his wrist. Another clutched a piece of paper, perhaps a phone number, a last desperate attempt to contact home. "This isn't just a crime at our border," Ibrahim said, his voice low but carrying to every person present. "This is a declaration of war against our nation, against our children, against humanity itself." He turned to face his men, and they saw something in his eyes that they had never seen before, a cold, implacable determination that went beyond anger. "From this moment, this becomes my personal mission. Operation Light of Justice begins now. We will hunt down these monsters wherever they hide, whatever it takes. We will not rest until every person involved in this evil is brought to justice." The border post was transformed into a crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off the area. Forensic teams arrived from the capital, working methodically to document everything. Each body was photographed, measured, and carefully removed from the truck. Personal effects were collected and cataloged: identification cards, religious items, photographs, scraps of paper with phone numbers. Each item told a story of a life interrupted, a journey that had ended in tragedy. The truck's driver, identified as Salim Wanure, was taken into custody. He was brought to a small room at the border post, where he sat handcuffed to a chair, still shaking. His clothes were soaked with sweat, and his eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. Ibrahim entered the room quietly and sat down across from him, studying the man for a long moment before speaking. "Who are you working for?" Ibrahim asked, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "I don't know anything," Salim whimpered. "I'm just a driver. They paid me to transport goods. I didn't know what was inside. I swear on my mother's grave I didn't know." Ibrahim leaned forward. "You're lying. The smell alone would have told you something was wrong. The weight of the truck would have felt different. And I can see in your eyes that you knew exactly what you were carrying." Salim began to cry, tears streaming down his face. "They'll kill me if I talk. They kill everyone who talks. You don't understand the kind of people they are." "Then help me understand," Ibrahim said. "Tell me everything and we'll protect you. But if you stay silent, you're as guilty as the people who did this. Those children in that truck, they were counting on someone to save them, and no one did. Don't let their deaths be meaningless." But Salim just shook his head, repeating over and over, "I don't know anything. I'm just a driver." Ibrahim left the interrogation room frustrated, but determined. Salim would break eventually, they always did. Meanwhile, there was other evidence to examine. The truck itself yielded important clues. Hidden in the cab was a notebook containing addresses and dates. GPS data from the truck's navigation system showed a pattern of trips between Burkina Faso and Malaysia, with stops at various locations along the way. The license plate was Malaysian. But the truck had been modified in ways that suggested it had been used for human transport before. Reinforced doors, soundproofing, and ventilation systems that could be controlled from the outside. The forensic examination of the bodies revealed even more disturbing details. Several showed signs of malnutrition and dehydration, suggesting they had been held captive for some time before being loaded into the truck. Some had marks on their wrists and ankles consistent with being restrained. One young woman had defensive wounds on her hands, suggesting she had fought against her captors. The medical examiner, a woman who had seen countless bodies in her career, had to take several breaks during the examination. So disturbed was she by what these young people had endured. On the third day after the discovery at the border, a miracle occurred. A young man stumbled into a police station in a small town near the capital. He was emaciated, his clothes hanging off his frame. His feet were bloody and bare, suggesting he had walked a great distance. He could barely stand, swaying on his feet as he approached the desk sergeant. "I need to speak to someone about the trafficking ring," he gasped. "I escaped. I can tell you who they are." Within the hour, he was in a secure room in the capital with Ibrahim himself sitting across from him. The young man's name was Abdul Karim Sanu, and his story would prove to be the breakthrough they desperately needed. "I'm from a small village in the north," Abdul Karim began, his voice hoarse from thirst and exhaustion. Ibrahim had given him water and food, but he seemed too anxious to eat much. "My mother is sick with diabetes, and we had no money for her medicine. I finished school but couldn't find work. When the recruiters came to our village, it seemed like an answer to prayer." "Tell me about these recruiters," Ibrahim prompted gently. "They said they were from a company called Black Star International, Étoile Noire International. They had fancy brochures showing nightclubs and stages, promising jobs as entertainers in Malaysia and the Gulf states. Good money, they said. Thousands of dollars a month, enough to send home and take care of my family. They showed us photos of young people just like us who had gone before and were now rich and successful." Abdul Karim's hands began to shake as he continued. 40 of us signed up from my village alone. They said we'd travel together, that everything was arranged. We were so excited, so hopeful. Our families threw going-away parties. My mother cried, but they were happy tears because she thought I would finally have a future. "What happened when you left?" "The first few days, everything seemed legitimate. We traveled in comfortable buses, stayed in decent hotels. The recruiters were friendly, always reassuring us. But then we reached a border crossing. I'm not sure which country. They took our phones so we couldn't track where we were. And everything changed." Abdul Karim's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "They took us to a large compound like a warehouse. Once we were inside, the doors locked behind us. They took our passports, our money, everything. We were trapped. What did they make you do?" Ibrahim asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Online fraud, mostly. They had hundreds of computers set up. They forced us to run romance scams, investment scams, anything to steal money from people. If you didn't meet your quota, they beat you. If you refused to work, they starved you. I watched my friend Usman die of fever because they wouldn't take him to a hospital. They just waited until he was dead, then took his body away in the night. We never saw him again." Tears streamed down Abdul Karim's face. "Some of the women were taken away separately. We heard screams sometimes. The men who took them would laugh and say they were earning their keep another way. I tried to protect one girl from my village, my neighbor's daughter. They broke my arm for interfering." He held up his left arm, which was still visibly crooked from where it had healed improperly. "How did you escape?" "We were moved to a different location, closer to the border. During the transfer, the truck we were in broke down in the middle of the night. The guards were distracted trying to fix it. I managed to slip away into the jungle. I walked for 3 days, hiding during the day, moving at night. I was sure they would find me and kill me, but I had to try. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't do what they wanted anymore." Ibrahim felt rage building inside him but kept his voice calm. "Abdul Karim, you've been incredibly brave. I need you to tell me everything you remember about the location, the people involved, anything that can help us find these criminals." From his tattered pocket, Abdul Karim produced a piece of paper, carefully folded and refolded until it was nearly falling apart. On it was a crude map drawn from memory. "This is the compound where I was held," he said, pointing to a rough square. "It's near a river. I could hear water at night. There's a large neem tree outside the main entrance, and the building itself is painted blue with white trim. The man in charge. Everyone called him Farid Naima. He walked around like he owned us because he did." Ibrahim took the map carefully as if it were made of gold. "This is exactly what we need. You've done an incredible service to your country, Abdul Karim. You've potentially saved hundreds of lives." But Abdul Karim just shook his head sadly. "Sir, there are still so many people there. My friends, people from my village. A girl named Amina, who was supposed to marry her childhood sweetheart when she came back rich. A boy named Ibrahim, named after you actually, who wanted to build his mother a house. They're still there, suffering. Please, you have to save them." "We will," Ibrahim promised. "I give you my word. And we'll make sure everyone involved in this pays for what they've done." That evening, Ibrahim convened an emergency meeting of his Security Council. The conference room was filled with military generals, intelligence chiefs, police commissioners, and government ministers. The atmosphere was grim as Ibrahim presented the evidence. Photographs of the frozen bodies from the truck, Abdul Karim's testimony, the map he had drawn, and intelligence reports that had been pieced together over the past several days. "Gentlemen, we are facing an organized criminal network of unprecedented scale," Ibrahim began. "This isn't just simple smuggling or even traditional human trafficking. This is industrial-scale enslavement. We're talking about hundreds, possibly thousands of young people being lured with false promises, then forced into criminal activity or worse." He moved to a large screen where a digital map displayed various locations marked in red. "Our intelligence suggests that Black Star International operates across multiple countries. They have recruiters in villages and cities throughout Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Ghana. They move their victims through a sophisticated network of safe houses and checkpoints. And they have protection, corrupt officials, paid-off police, connections to organized crime syndicates." General Ouedraogo, the head of the armed forces, leaned forward. "What are you proposing, Captain?" "I'm proposing that we launch Operation Light of Justice, a comprehensive campaign to dismantle this network completely. Not just arrest a few low-level operatives, but destroy the entire organization from top to bottom." "That's ambitious," noted the intelligence chief, Major Traoré. "We're talking about operations that will likely extend beyond our borders. We'll need international cooperation." "Then we'll get it," Ibrahim replied firmly. "I'll personally contact our counterparts in neighboring countries. I'll go to Interpol if necessary. This isn't just Burkina Faso's problem, it's a regional crisis." "What about the financial aspect?" asked the Minister of Finance. "An operation of this scale will be expensive." Ibrahim fixed him with a hard stare. "How much are our children worth? Can we put a price on their freedom, their lives? We'll find the money. We'll reallocate budgets if we have to. This is a national priority." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone absorbed the gravity of the situation. Then, one by one, heads began to nod in agreement. "I'll assign my best investigators," promised the police commissioner. "The intelligence service will prioritize gathering information on Black Star's network," added Major Traoré. "My troops are ready to deploy wherever needed." General Ouedraogo confirmed. Ibrahim felt a surge of pride in his colleagues. "Thank you. Now let's discuss specifics. According to Abdul Karim's map and our intelligence, one of Black Star's main recruitment hubs is in the Singé market here in Ouagadougou. They operate under the cover of a fabric shop, but it's actually where they meet with potential victims and process their documents." He pulled up surveillance photos on the screen. "The person running this operation is a woman named Madame Rani. She appears to be a respectable businesswoman, but she's actually one of the key figures in the network. I propose we target her for arrest, but not immediately." "Why wait?" asked one of the ministers. "Because arresting her too soon could tip off the rest of the network," Ibrahim explained. "Instead, I want to use her to lead us to the bigger fish. We'll put her under surveillance, track her contacts, follow her money. Madame Rani is a link in the chain, but she's not at the top. We need to find out who's giving her orders." The meeting continued for several more hours as they hammered out the details of the operation. Teams were assigned specific roles: surveillance units to watch known Black Star operatives, forensic accountants to trace the money flow, cyber warfare specialists to infiltrate their online operations, and tactical units to conduct raids when the time came. As the meeting was winding down, Major Traoré spoke up. "Captain, there's one more thing. Our sources indicate that Black Star has someone they call Al-Kabir, the big one. He's supposedly the mastermind behind the entire operation, but nobody seems to know who he really is." "It's like he's a ghost," Ibrahim nodded slowly. "Then we'll hunt ghosts if we have to. This Al-Kabir, whoever he is, will be brought to justice along with all his subordinates. To infiltrate Black Star's recruitment operation, Ibrahim needed someone who could convincingly pose as a potential victim. The person would need to be young enough to be believable, skilled enough to handle themselves in danger, and brave enough to walk into the lion's den knowing they might not walk out. That person was Fatima Diallo. At 26, Fatima was one of the intelligence service's most promising agents. She had grown up in a rural village much like those being targeted by Black Star, so she understood the hopes and desperation that made people vulnerable to their promises. She had joined the intelligence service after her own brother had nearly been trafficked to Libya, only escaping by jumping from a moving vehicle. Since then, she had made it her mission to fight human trafficking in all its forms. When Ibrahim presented the mission to her, Fatima didn't hesitate. "I'll do it," she said immediately. "These people are preying on the most vulnerable. They need to be stopped. You understand the risks?" Ibrahim asked. "If they discover who you really are, they won't hesitate to kill you." "I understand," Fatima replied calmly. "But I also understand that if we don't stop them, more children will end up like those in that refrigerator truck. I'm willing to take the risk." Over the next few days, Fatima's new identity was carefully constructed. Her name would be Amina Ouedraogo, a 22-year-old woman from a small village outside Ouagadougou. Her mother was sick, a common truth among Black Star's victims, and she desperately needed money for treatment. She had basic education but few job prospects. She was exactly the kind of person Black Star targeted. A false social media profile was created, complete with photos, carefully selected to show a modest lifestyle, posts about family struggles, and connections to real people from the village who had agreed to be part of her cover story. Everything was designed to make her appear authentic and, most importantly, vulnerable. The bait was set, and it didn't take long for Black Star to notice. Within 48 hours of Fatima posting about her desperate search for work, a man named Arwan reached out through social media. His profile claimed he was a talent scout for international entertainment companies. His message was smooth and professional. "Hello, Amina. I saw your post about seeking work. I represent Black Star International, and we're currently recruiting young people for opportunities in Malaysia. The pay is excellent. You could earn enough in 6 months to pay for your mother's treatment and set up your family for life. We handle all travel arrangements and visas. Would you be interested in learning more?" In the monitoring room, a team of agents watched as the conversation unfolded on multiple screens. Every word was recorded, every detail noted. Ibrahim stood in the back of the room, his arms crossed, watching intently. Fatima played her role perfectly, expressing interest mixed with appropriate caution. She asked about the job details, the pay, the living conditions. Arwan's responses followed a clear script. He promised fame, wealth, and success, all for minimal work. It was the classic too good to be true offer, but delivered with enough confidence and detail to be believable to someone desperate enough to want to believe. After several exchanges over 2 days, Arwan suggested they meet in person. "There's a cafe by the river near the big neem tree," he wrote. "Very quiet and private. We can discuss the details and I can show you the contract. Can you meet me there tomorrow at 3 p.m.? Ibrahim's jaw tightened when he read that message. It was the same location Abdul Karim had marked on his map. Everything was connecting. "We have them," Major Kabore said quietly. "Not yet," Ibrahim replied. "We have one recruiter. We need the whole network." The cafe by the river was indeed quiet, shaded by an enormous neem tree that must have been hundreds of years old. It was the kind of place where lovers met for secret assignations and business people discussed deals they didn't want overheard. Perfect for human traffickers. Fatima arrived early, dressed in simple clothes that suggested poverty without crossing into obvious destitution. She carried an old cloth bag and wore her hair pulled back in a modest style. To anyone watching, she was just another village girl hoping for a chance at a better life. The surveillance team was already in position. 2 agents posed as an elderly couple having tea in the corner. Another pretended to be a student studying at a nearby table. A vendor sold fruit from a cart outside within visual range of the cafe entrance. And in a van parked a block away, Ibrahim monitored everything through hidden cameras and microphones. Arwan arrived exactly on time. He was tall and thin, well-dressed in a way that suggested success without being ostentatious. He smiled warmly as he approached Fatima's table, projecting confidence and trustworthiness. "Amina? I'm Arwan. Thank you for meeting me." He sat down across from her and immediately began his pitch. From a leather satchel, he pulled out glossy brochures showing beautiful people in glamorous settings, nightclubs, concert halls, luxury apartments. "This could be you in just a few months," he said smoothly. "We've helped hundreds of young people from Burkina Faso achieve their dreams." Fatima played her part well, asking innocent questions while subtly steering the conversation toward more incriminating topics. "How much does it cost to join the program?" she asked. "That's the best part," Arwan replied. "We cover all initial expenses, travel, visas, training. You don't pay anything up front. Instead, you work off the cost over your first few months. After that, all the money is yours to keep. Work off the cost?" Fatima repeated, letting a note of concern creep into her voice. "How much debt would I owe?" Arwan waved his hand dismissively. "It's just a formality. Most people pay it off in 3 to 4 months. The important thing is that you have an opportunity most people never get. Can I see the contract?" From his satchel, Arwan produced several pages of densely printed text. The contract was deliberately complex, filled with legal jargon and clauses that were designed to confuse rather than clarify. But Fatima, trained to spot such things, immediately noticed several red flags. The work off the cost clause had no specific dollar amount attached. There were provisions allowing the employer to withhold all wages until debt was satisfied. Another clause required the worker to surrender their passport for safekeeping. "This seems very complicated," Fatima said hesitantly. "Could I have a lawyer look at it?" For just a moment, Arwan's friendly mask slipped, revealing something colder underneath. But he quickly recovered. "Of course, but I should mention that we have limited spaces available. We're only taking 5 more people from Burkina Faso this month, and 3 spots have already been filled. If you want time to think about it, that's fine. But the opportunity might not be available when you're ready." It was a classic pressure tactic. And it was the final piece of evidence they needed. Ibrahim's voice crackled in Fatima's nearly invisible earpiece. "We've got enough. Operation is go." Fatima nodded subtly, then looked up at Arwan with practiced innocence. Actually, I think she didn't get to finish. The doors to the cafe burst open as agents flooded in from multiple directions. Arwan's eyes went wide with shock as he realized what was happening. He started to stand, reaching for something in his jacket, but was immediately tackled by 2 agents. Within seconds, he was face down on the floor, hands cuffed behind his back. The other cafe patrons, all of whom were undercover agents, revealed their true identities. The elderly couple drew weapons. The student pulled out handcuffs. Even the fruit vendor outside rushed in to assist. Ibrahim entered the cafe, towering over the prostrate Arwan. "You're under arrest for human trafficking, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent, though I don't think that will help you much." Arwan's face had gone pale. "I'm just a recruiter," he stammered. "A small fish? I don't know anything about the big operation." "Then you'd better hope your memory improves," Ibrahim replied coldly, "because right now you're looking at spending the rest of your life in prison. Unless, of course, you're willing to cooperate." Back at intelligence headquarters, Arwan sat in an interrogation room, looking far less confident than he had at the cafe. The reality of his situation was setting in. He had been caught red-handed in a sting operation, with video and audio evidence of everything he had said. There would be no talking his way out of this. Ibrahim let him sit for a while, a classic interrogation technique. Let the suspect's imagination work against him. When Ibrahim finally entered the room, Arwan looked up hopefully, as if expecting a way out. "I want a lawyer," Arwan said, though his voice lacked conviction. "You'll get one eventually," Ibrahim replied, sitting down across from him. "But first, let's talk about your future. Right now, you're facing charges that will put you in prison for at least 20 years, possibly life. You're young. What are you, 28, 30? You'll be an old man before you see freedom again." Arwan swallowed hard, but said nothing. "However," Ibrahim continued, "if you cooperate fully, tell us everything about Black Star's operation. We might be able to reduce your sentence significantly. Maybe you do 10 years instead of life. Maybe you even get out in time to have some kind of life." "They'll kill me if I talk," Arwan whispered. "They'll kill you if you don't," Ibrahim countered. "Do you think your friends at Black Star are going to help you?" Do you think they're going to risk themselves to protect a recruiter who got caught? You're expendable to them. The moment you were arrested, you became a liability. The truth of this seemed to hit Arwan hard. His shoulders slumped. Look, Ibrahim said, softening his tone slightly. I'm not your enemy. The people who deserve your loyalty are the ones who put you in this position, knowing that if you got caught, you'd take the fall while they stayed safe. Is that really who you want to protect? After a long silence, Arwan spoke. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with who you report to. Madam Rani, Arwan said quietly. She runs the recruitment operation for this region. She works out of a fabric shop in Singay Market, but that's just a front. Her real business is finding people for Black Star. And who does she report to? I don't know all the details. They keep things compartmentalized, you know? But I've heard her mention someone named Farid Naima. He's higher up in the organization, handles the logistics of moving people across borders. Ibrahim felt a surge of satisfaction. That matched what Abdul Karim had said. The puzzle pieces were fitting together. Tell me about the operation. How many people have you recruited? Arwan looked down at his hands. Personally? Maybe 50 or 60 over the past 2 years. But I'm just one recruiter. Madam Rani has at least a dozen people working for her, probably more. And she's just one cell. Black Star operates across West Africa, plus they have connections in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. 50 or 60 people, Ibrahim repeated, his voice tight with controlled anger. Do you know what happened to them? Some actually did get jobs, I think. But most. Arwan trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. Most what? Ibrahim pressed. Most ended up in debt bondage, forced to work in scam operations, factories, or worse. The women especially. I tried not to think about what happened to them. Ibrahim slammed his hand on the table, making Arwan jump. You tried not to think about it? These were human beings. Someone's daughter, someone's son. And you sold them into slavery for what? Money? I needed the money, Arwan said weakly. I have debts of my own. They promised me. I don't care what they promised you, Ibrahim cut him off. You made a choice. You chose money over human lives. But now you have another choice. You can help us stop this, or you can go down with everyone else. Over the next several hours, Arwan provided detailed information about Black Star's recruitment methods, the locations of safe houses, the routes used to move victims across borders, and most importantly, everything he knew about Madam Rani's operation. He drew maps, provided names, and even unlocked his phone to show chat logs and payment records. It was a treasure trove of intelligence, but Ibrahim knew they needed to act quickly. The moment Arwan failed to check in with his handlers, they would know something was wrong. The Singay market was one of the busiest in Ouagadougou, a sprawling maze of stalls and shops selling everything from fresh produce to electronics. Madam Rani's fabric shop was tucked into a corner of the market, unremarkable except for the steady stream of young people who came and went throughout the day. For 3 days, surveillance teams watched the shop from various positions around the market. Some posed as other vendors, others as shoppers browsing the stalls. Hidden cameras captured everyone who entered or left. Listening devices picked up conversations inside. What they observed confirmed Arwan's testimony. Young people would arrive looking hopeful, carrying their life savings and dreams of a better future. Madam Rani, a well-dressed woman in her 40s with an air of maternal warmth, would welcome them like a favorite aunt. She would serve them tea, ask about their families, and listen sympathetically to their struggles. Then she would paint vivid pictures of the opportunities waiting for them abroad. Good jobs, nice apartments, the chance to send money home and make their families proud. The young people would leave her shop with contracts in hand, believing they were on the path to prosperity. They had no idea they were being sold into bondage. Ibrahim watched the surveillance footage in the operations room, his anger growing with each interaction. She's good, he admitted grimly. She makes them trust her, makes them believe she cares about them. That makes it even worse. Major Kabore stood beside him. When do we move? Tomorrow morning, Ibrahim decided. Market day, when there will be plenty of witnesses. I want everyone to see that no one is above the law, no matter how respectable they appear. The operation was planned with military precision. Plainclothes officers would be positioned throughout the market. Uniformed police would seal off the exits. A tactical team would be ready to breach the shop if Madame Rani tried to barricade herself inside. Medical personnel would be on standby in case anyone was injured. The next morning, the market was already bustling with activity when the operation began. Shoppers haggled over prices, vendors called out their wares, and children ran between the stalls. It was a scene of normal, everyday life, about to be disrupted in a major way. Fatima, still in her undercover role, approached Madame Rani's shop. She was wired with audio and video recording equipment, capturing everything for evidence. As she entered, Madame Rani looked up with a welcoming smile. "Good morning, my dear. How can I help you today?" "I heard you can help people find work abroad," Fatima said, playing her role perfectly. "My mother is sick and I need money for her treatment." Madame Rani's smile widened. "You've come to the right place. Sit down. Let's talk about your future." As Madame Rani began her usual pitch, Fatima gave a subtle signal. Immediately, officers poured into the shop from multiple directions. The transformation on Madame Rani's face was dramatic. The maternal warmth vanished, replaced by cold calculation as she realized what was happening. She tried to run for a back door, but officers were already there. She was surrounded with no possibility of escape. As handcuffs were placed on her wrists, she turned to Fatima with a look of recognition and grudging respect. "Clever," she said simply. "I should have known something was off about you." Outside, the market had erupted into chaos. Shoppers and vendors crowded around, trying to see what was happening. Police officers kept them back, but couldn't stop the murmurs and speculation that spread like wildfire through the crowd. Ibrahim emerged from the shop with Madame Rani in custody between two officers. He raised his voice to address the gathered crowd. "This woman has been arrested for human trafficking. She and others like her have been preying on our children, selling them into slavery with false promises. Let this be a message to everyone involved in such crimes. We are coming for you. There is nowhere you can hide." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered and applauded. Others looked shocked, unable to believe that the friendly fabric seller was a criminal. A few young people in the crowd suddenly looked frightened. Perhaps they had been planning to sign up with her, and had just narrowly escaped a terrible fate. As Madame Rani was led to a police vehicle, she turned to Ibrahim with an odd smile. "You think you've won something today, but this is nothing. You have no idea how deep this goes, how many people are involved. Even arresting me won't stop it." "We'll see about that," Ibrahim replied. "You're going to tell us everything you know. And then we're going to tear down your entire organization in the interrogation room." Madame Rani proved to be a much tougher subject than Arwan. She sat calmly in her chair, showing no signs of fear or remorse. When offered water, she declined. When read her rights, she simply nodded. She had been in law enforcement custody before, though never for anything this serious, and she knew how the game was played. "I want to make a deal," she said immediately. "I'll give you information, but I want immunity from prosecution." Ibrahim, watching from behind a one-way mirror, shook his head. "Not a chance," he told the interrogating officer through his earpiece. "She's not in a position to make demands." The interrogator conveyed this to Madame Rani, who shrugged. "Then I guess we have nothing to talk about. I'll wait for my lawyer." "You can wait all you want," the interrogator replied. "But you should know that we found your records. Ledgers detailing every person you recruited, how much money changed hands, everything. We don't actually need your confession. We have enough evidence to convict you 10 times over. What we're offering you is the chance to show some remorse, to help us save the people who are still trapped. That might earn you some consideration when it comes to sentencing." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Madame Rani's face. "You found my records?" "Every single one. Hidden in a false compartment under the floor of your shop. We have forensic accountants going through them right now." This was partially true. They had found records, though not as complete as the interrogator suggested. But the bluff worked. Madame Rani's confidence wavered. "Fine," she said finally. "What do you want to know?" "Start with the people at the top. Who runs Black Star International?" Madame Rani laughed bitterly. "You think I know that? I'm middle management at best. I recruit people and pass them up the chain. I get paid for each successful recruitment." "That's it? Then who do you pass them to?" A man named Farid Naima. He handles the logistics, transportation, documentation, getting people across borders. He's the one who actually moves them to the camps. Camps? Ibrahim interjected, speaking directly into the interrogator's earpiece. Ask her about the camps. Tell us about the camps. Madame Rani hesitated, then seemed to decide she had nothing left to lose. There are several, scattered across West Africa and Southeast Asia. That's where they take the recruits. The camps are disguised as training facilities, but really they're prisons. They keep people there until they're broken enough to do whatever they're told, work in scam operations, prostitution, whatever makes money. How many people are in these camps? I don't know exact numbers. Hundreds, maybe thousands across all the locations. They're constantly moving people around to avoid detection. And this Farid Naima, where can we find him? I don't know his exact location. He moves around a lot. But I do know he's planning to meet with Al-Kabir soon. There's a big operation in the works, something involving a new camp near the border with Niger. Who is Al-Kabir? Madame Rani's expression turned fearful for the first time. He's the one who really runs everything. Farid is just his lieutenant. Al-Kabir is the mastermind, the one who built this whole network. Nobody knows his real identity. He always wears a mask when meeting with subordinates. But he's the one you should be afraid of. He's ruthless. People who cross him don't just disappear, they disappear painfully. Ibrahim felt both frustrated and energized. They were getting closer to the top of the organization, but there were still layers to peel back. Al-Kabir remained a phantom, but at least now they had a name and some sense of his role. When and where is this meeting between Farid and Al-Kabir? I don't know exactly. Farid mentioned it in passing, said something about the Al-Bagra resort. It's supposed to happen sometime in the next week. Ibrahim immediately relayed this information to his team. The Al-Bagra resort was a luxury facility on the outskirts of the city, popular with business executives and wealthy tourists. It would be the perfect place for a clandestine meeting, private, secure, and innocuous enough not to draw attention. Get surveillance on that resort immediately, Ibrahim ordered. I want cameras, listening devices, undercover staff, everything. If Farid and Al-Kabir are meeting there, we're going to be ready. For 3 tense days, the surveillance team watched the Al-Bagra resort. Guests came and went, businessmen, tourists, couples on romantic getaways, but no one matching the description of Farid Naima. Ibrahim was beginning to wonder if Madame Rani had given them false information, or if the meeting had been canceled. Then, on the evening of the 4th day, 2 black SUVs with tinted windows pulled up to the resort's entrance. From the first vehicle emerged a man in his mid-30s, medium height, with a neatly trimmed beard and expensive sunglasses despite the fading light. The surveillance team's facial recognition software immediately flagged him. Farid Naima, wanted in connection with human trafficking across 4 countries. From the second SUV emerged another man, taller and more heavily built, surrounded by 4 bodyguards. Most strikingly, he wore a traditional African mask that covered his entire face, an unusual choice that made him impossible to identify, but also made him stand out dramatically. That has to be Al-Kabir, Major Kabore said, watching the live feed. Who else would wear a mask like that? It's clever, Ibrahim admitted. Even if we capture this on camera, we can't prove who he is. But it doesn't matter. We'll know who he is soon enough. The 2 men and their entourage entered the resort and were shown to a private conference room that the resort reserved for high-profile guests. The surveillance team had managed to place a listening device in the room during the previous night, hidden inside an electrical outlet. Within minutes, they were listening to one of the most damning conversations Ibrahim had ever heard. The operation in Burkina Faso is compromised, Farid's voice came through clearly. They arrested Arwan and Madame Rani. The police are getting too close. Then we accelerate our timeline, replied a deep, authoritative voice that must have been Al-Kabir. How many recruits do we have ready to move? About 200 from Burkina Faso alone. Another 300 from Mali and Niger combined. Move them all. Transfer them to the camp in Thailand. We'll pivot our operations there until things cool down in West Africa. What about the ones already in the camps here? Liquidate them. There was a pause. All of them? Farid asked, his voice uncertain. All of them. Al-Kabir confirmed coldly. They've seen too much, and we can't risk them being rescued and testifying against us. Make it look like an accident, a fire, a building collapse, something that leaves no survivors and no evidence. Do it within the next 48 hours. Ibrahim felt ice run through his veins. They were talking about murdering hundreds of people to cover their tracks. He grabbed the radio. All teams prepare to move in immediately. We can't wait any longer. The tactical teams had been positioned around the resort for days, ready to move at a moment's notice. Now they sprang into action with practiced efficiency. The resort's exits were sealed. Guests were quietly evacuated from nearby rooms. Snipers took position on surrounding buildings. Inside the conference room, Farid and Al-Kabir were still talking, unaware of the net closing around them. There's one more thing, Farid said. The police captain running the investigation, Ibrahim Traoré. He's becoming a problem. He's too dedicated, too honest. We can't bribe him or intimidate him. Then eliminate him, Al-Kabir said simply. Make it look like a traffic accident or a robbery gone wrong. Once he's out of the way, we can get back to business as usual. That was the final straw. Ibrahim gave the order. Go, go, go! The tactical team breached the conference room from 3 directions simultaneously. Flashbang grenades temporarily blinded and disoriented everyone inside. Farid tried to draw a weapon but was tackled before he could fire. The bodyguards put up more resistance, and brief gunfire erupted before they were overwhelmed by superior numbers. Al-Kabir, however, proved more elusive. In the chaos of the breach, he managed to slip through a service door that led to the resort's kitchen. By the time the tactical team realized he was gone and gave chase, he had disappeared into the maze-like basement of the building. We have Farid in custody, the team leader reported. But Al-Kabir escaped through the maintenance tunnels. We're searching now, but it's a warren down here. Ibrahim rushed to the scene, frustration and anger warring inside him. They had been so close to catching both of them. Seal all the exits, he ordered. He can't have gotten far. Search every inch of this building and the surrounding area. Despite an intensive search that lasted through the night, Al-Kabir remained at large. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, living up to his reputation as a ghost-like figure who could never be caught. But they did have Farid, and that was something. As dawn broke, Ibrahim stood over the handcuffed prisoner, who sat with his head down, knowing his life as he knew it was over. You're going to tell us everything, Ibrahim said quietly. Where the camps are, how many people are in them, and most importantly, who Al-Kabir really is. Farid looked up with a mixture of fear and defiance. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Al-Kabir isn't just one person, he's an idea, a network. Even if you stop him, someone else will take his place. Then we'll stop them too, Ibrahim replied. As many times as it takes. Now start talking, or I'll make sure you never see daylight again. The interrogation of Farid Naima proved even more difficult than Madame Rani's. He was a hardened criminal with years of experience. And he knew that cooperation meant betraying Al-Kabir, a death sentence even in prison. But he also knew that remaining silent meant facing the full force of the law with no possibility of leniency. Ibrahim employed a different strategy. Instead of threats, he showed Farid the evidence. Photographs of the victims found in the refrigerator truck. Abdul Karim's testimony, financial records showing the millions of dollars that had flowed through Black Star's operations. Most devastating of all, he showed Farid video footage recovered from one of the camps, young people begging for help, their spirits broken by months of captivity and abuse. These are the people you helped enslave, Ibrahim said quietly. Some of them are dead now. Others wish they were. Is this really what you want your legacy to be? For the first time, Farid's mask of indifference cracked. His eyes lingered on the video footage, and something like shame flickered across his face. You said Al-Kabir ordered you to liquidate the camps, Ibrahim continued. That means murdering hundreds of innocent people. But you haven't done it yet, have you? Because despite everything, you're not a mass murderer. You're a criminal, yes, but you're not that. Farid was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, the main camp is in the forest near the Niger border. About 400 people are being held there. I was supposed to give the order yesterday, but I couldn't do it. Where exactly? Farid described the location in detail, a remote area accessible only by rough forest roads, surrounded by dense jungle that provided natural concealment. The camp was defended by about 30 armed guards, and the compound itself was designed like a prison, with high fences, watchtowers, and locked dormitories. "We need to move fast," Major Cabaret said urgently. "If Al-Kabir realizes Farid is in custody and hasn't carried out his orders, he might send someone else to do it." Ibrahim nodded grimly. "Assemble a strike force. We're going in tonight." The operation was the most ambitious they had attempted yet. The camp was technically in a border region where jurisdiction was complicated. They would need to coordinate with neighboring countries' authorities, but there was no time for lengthy diplomatic negotiations. Ibrahim made the decision to proceed with or without official approval. He would deal with the political consequences later. Saving 400 lives was more important than protocol. By nightfall, a force of over 100 soldiers, police officers, and intelligence agents had assembled near the border. They had detailed maps based on Farid's description and satellite imagery obtained through international intelligence sharing. The plan was to surround the camp, cut off escape routes, and then breach the compound from multiple directions simultaneously. "Our priority is the safety of the captives," Ibrahim emphasized in the final briefing. "These people have been through hell. We're here to liberate them, not to add to their trauma. Only use lethal force if absolutely necessary. Understood?" A chorus of "Yes, sir," echoed through the assembled troops. As darkness fell completely, the force moved out in a convoy of military vehicles. The journey took them deep into unmarked territory, following rough tracks that barely qualified as roads. The jungle pressed in from all sides, alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone knew this could turn into a firefight at any moment. They reached the staging area 2 kilometers from the target at midnight. From here, they would proceed on foot to avoid alerting the guards with engine noise. The troops moved through the jungle like shadows, their years of training evident in their silence and coordination. Through night vision goggles, Ibrahim could see the camp in the distance, a cluster of buildings surrounded by a high fence topped with barbed wire. Watchtowers stood at each corner with guards visible on patrol. Generator-powered lights illuminated the compound, creating harsh shadows. The assault teams moved into position around the perimeter. The sniper team, positioned on a ridge overlooking the camp, reported that they had clear lines of sight to the watchtowers. The breach team prepared their equipment at the main gate. The search and rescue team stood ready to enter once the compound was secured. At exactly 1 a.m., Ibrahim gave the signal. Everything happened at once. The cyber warfare team, operating from a mobile command center, jammed all communications in and out of the camp. The snipers took out the watchtower guards with suppressed rifles. The breach team blew the main gate with shaped charges. And from 3 other points around the perimeter, additional teams cut through the fence and poured into the compound. The camp guards, caught completely off guard, scrambled to respond. Some tried to organize a defense, but were quickly overwhelmed by superior numbers and training. A few attempted to flee into the jungle, but ran straight into the perimeter teams. Within 15 minutes, all organized resistance had collapsed. But the real work was just beginning. The rescue teams moved systematically through the compound, searching every building. What they found was heartbreaking. In the dormitories, dozens of young people were chained to beds or locked in cells. They were emaciated, many showing signs of physical abuse. Some cowered in fear when the soldiers entered, too traumatized to understand they were being rescued. "It's okay," the soldiers repeated over and over in multiple languages. "We're from Burkina Faso. We're here to take you home." "You're safe now." Slowly, understanding dawned. Some of the captives began to cry with relief. Others seemed unable to process what was happening, staring blankly as if they had forgotten what freedom felt like. The medical teams moved in, providing immediate treatment for the most serious cases while beginning the process of documenting the abuse for evidence. In one of the administrative buildings, the strike team found the camp's records, detailed lists of every person who had been brought there, where they had been recruited from, and in many cases what had happened to them. It was a damning document that would prove invaluable in prosecuting everyone involved, but they also found something else: plans for a new operation, even larger in scope than what they had just shut down. Black Star International, it seemed, had been planning to expand into Central Africa and establish camps in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Central African Republic. The scale of their ambition was staggering. Ibrahim stood in the camp's command center, surrounded by evidence of systematic evil. "How many people did we rescue?" he asked. 417, sir," Major Kabore reported. "Mostly from West African countries, but also some from East Africa and even a few from Asia. They've been here anywhere from a few weeks to over a year." "Casualties?" "On our side, 3 wounded, none serious. Among the guards, 12 dead, 18 captured. Among the captives," he paused, "we found 17 bodies in a makeshift morgue. They died of disease, abuse, or in some cases were killed as examples to keep the others compliant." Ibrahim closed his eyes briefly, offering a silent prayer for the dead. Then he opened them, his resolve hardened. "Make sure every single guard and administrator is arrested and charged. I want them all to face justice." As dawn broke over the liberated camp, the rescued captives were loaded into buses for the journey to safety. Medical facilities had been prepared to receive them, along with psychologists, social workers, and family liaison officers who would help reunite them with their loved ones. One young woman approached Ibrahim as she was about to board a bus. "Sir," she said quietly, "thank you doesn't seem like enough, but thank you." We had given up hope of ever going home. Ibrahim took her hand gently. "You're going home now, and we're going to make sure the people who did this to you never harm anyone again." Back in Ouagadougou, the mood was one of triumph, tempered by frustration. They had rescued over 400 people and arrested dozens of Black Star operatives, but Al-Kabir remained at large. And as long as he was free, the network could potentially rebuild. Intelligence reports suggested that Al-Kabir had fled the country, possibly to Libya or Nigeria, where Black Star had other operations. Interpol had been alerted and international arrest warrants issued, but finding him would require resources and cooperation that might take months or years to coordinate. Ibrahim refused to accept this. Al-Kabir had nearly killed him, had enslaved thousands of people, and represented an ongoing threat to every vulnerable person in the region. He had to be found and stopped. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the guards captured at the camp, facing life in prison, decided to cooperate fully. His name was Ousmane Sawadogo, and he had been with Black Star for 3 years, working his way up from driver to camp security chief. He knew things that even Farid didn't know. Al-Kabir's real name is Karim Diarra, Ousmane revealed during his interrogation. "He's actually from Burkina Faso originally, though he's lived in a dozen countries. He has multiple passports and identities. The mask he wears isn't just for drama. He had plastic surgery to change his face, but there was a complication that left scars. He's vain, so he hides them. Where would he go if he felt threatened?" Ibrahim asked. "He has a compound in northern Nigeria, near the Cameroon border. It's his ultimate safe house, heavily fortified. If he's anywhere, he's there." This information was gold, but it also presented a problem. Nigeria was a sovereign nation, and conducting an operation on their territory without permission would create a major diplomatic incident. Ibrahim contacted his counterparts in Nigerian law enforcement, explaining the situation and requesting cooperation. The response was encouraging. Nigeria had its own problems with human trafficking and was eager to take down a major player like Al-Kabir. Within days, a joint operation was being planned, bringing together Burkina Faso and Nigerian security forces. The compound was indeed heavily fortified, high walls, armed guards, surveillance systems, and reportedly even some explosive booby traps. But intelligence suggested that only Al-Kabir and about 20 loyal associates were there. They were expecting trouble, but probably not the full-scale assault that was about to hit them. The operation was scheduled for pre-dawn, the time when human alertness is at its lowest. A combined force of over 200 soldiers crossed the border in the dead of night. Moving toward the target with lethal purpose, Ibrahim was there personally, having argued that he had earned the right to see this through to the end. As they approached the compound, he could feel his heart pounding, not with fear, but with the anticipation of finally bringing this nightmare to a close. The assault began with a drone strike that took out the compound's generator, plunging everything into darkness. Night vision-equipped assault teams immediately breached the walls from 4 directions. The guards, suddenly blind and disoriented, put up less resistance than expected. Al-Kabir tried to escape through yet another hidden tunnel, but this time intelligence had anticipated it. A team was waiting at the tunnel exit, and when Al-Kabir emerged, he ran straight into their guns. Karim Diarra, also known as Al-Kabir, "You're under arrest," announced the Nigerian commander leading that team. For the first time, Al-Kabir's composure completely cracked. Without his mask, his scarred face was visible, a reminder that vanity had been his downfall in more ways than one. He tried to bargain, offering money, information, anything for a deal. But there would be no deals this time. Ibrahim arrived as Al-Kabir was being handcuffed. The 2 men locked eyes, the captain who had sworn to protect his people, and the criminal mastermind who had preyed upon them. "It's over," Ibrahim said simply. "Your network is destroyed, your associates are in custody, and the people you enslaved are free." "You've lost everything," Al-Kabir laughed bitterly. "You think this ends with me? There are a dozen organizations just like Black Star. You've won 1 battle, but the war will never end." "Then we'll keep fighting," Ibrahim replied. "Every single battle for as long as it takes. Because that's what justice demands." The trials took months. Al-Kabir, Farid Naima, Madam Rani, and over 130 other Black Star operatives faced charges ranging from human trafficking to murder. The evidence against them was overwhelming: documentation, victim testimony, financial records, and their own recorded conversations. The courtroom scenes were emotional. Survivors testified about their ordeal, often breaking down as they recounted the abuse they had suffered. Families of those who hadn't survived demanded justice. The defendants showed varying degrees of remorse, from Arwan's genuine guilt to Al-Kabir's complete lack of empathy. In the end, justice was served. Al-Kabir received multiple life sentences with no possibility of parole. Farid and Madam Rani got 30 years each. The other operatives received sentences ranging from 10 to 25 years. Every single person involved in Black Star's operations faced consequences for their actions, but punishment wasn't enough. The survivors needed help to rebuild their lives. The government established a comprehensive rehabilitation program, providing medical care, psychological counseling, job training, and financial assistance. Many survivors struggled with trauma, addiction, and difficulty trusting people, but slowly, with support, they began to heal. Abdul Karim Sanu, whose escape and testimony had been crucial to breaking the case, became an advocate for trafficking victims. He traveled around Burkina Faso and neighboring countries, speaking at schools and community centers about the warning signs of trafficking schemes. His mother, whose illness had driven him to seek work abroad, received the treatment she needed and was recovering well. Fatima Diallo received commendations for her undercover work and was promoted within the intelligence service. She continued to work on anti-trafficking operations, bringing the same courage and dedication to each case. The young woman who had thanked Ibrahim at the liberated camp returned to her village and eventually started a small business with a government microloan. She employed other trafficking survivors, giving them both income and a sense of purpose. As for Ibrahim Traoré, he never forgot what he had seen in that refrigerator truck at the border. The memory of those frozen faces haunted him, but it also inspired him. He established a specialized anti-trafficking unit within Burkina Faso's security forces, trained to identify and dismantle human trafficking networks. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso became a regional leader in fighting human trafficking. Other West African nations sent officers to train with Ibrahim's unit, and the collaborative approach led to several more successful operations against other criminal networks. 1 year after the rescue of the camp victims, a memorial was established in Ouagadougou. It honored the 17 people who had died in Black Star's captivity, along with the unknown number of others who had died in similar operations around the world. The memorial was a simple but powerful design, a ring of stones surrounding an eternal flame, with a plaque that read, "In memory of the stolen. May their light guide us to justice." At the memorial's dedication ceremony, Ibrahim gave a speech to the gathered crowd of survivors, families, government officials, and ordinary citizens. What happened to these people was not just a crime, it was an assault on our humanity, he said. These criminals sought to turn human beings into commodities, to reduce someone's child, someone's hope for the future into nothing more than a source of profit. But they failed. They failed because good people refused to look away. They failed because survivors like Abdul Karim had the courage to speak up. They failed because ordinary citizens provided tips and information. And they failed because we, as a society, decided that human dignity is worth fighting for. He paused, looking out over the crowd. This memorial is not just about remembering the past. It's about commitment to the future. We must remain vigilant. Human trafficking still exists, not just in distant countries, but here, in our communities. We must educate our children, support vulnerable families, and never stop fighting against those who would prey upon the weak. The light of justice must continue to shine, driving out the darkness wherever we find it. The crowd erupted in applause. Among them were many of the people Ibrahim had rescued, living proof that even the deepest darkness could be overcome. As the ceremony concluded and people began to disperse, a young girl approached Ibrahim. She couldn't have been more than 12 years old, with bright eyes and a shy smile. "Captain Traoré?" she said hesitantly. "My older sister was one of the people you saved. She came home last year and now she's better. She told me what you did for her and all the others. I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to help people too." Ibrahim knelt down so he was at eye level with the girl. "You know what? I think you'll be even better than me. Because you're growing up in a world where people are aware of these problems and committed to solving them. Your generation will finish what we started." The girl beamed with pride, then ran back to her family. Ibrahim stood up, watching her go. Around him, life continued. Vendors selling food, children playing, people going about their daily business. It was an ordinary scene, but to Ibrahim it was beautiful in its ordinariness. This was what he fought for. The right of people to live normal lives, free from fear, free from exploitation. His phone buzzed with a message from Major Traoré. New intel on a possible trafficking network operating in the eastern provinces. "Requesting your input," Ibrahim smiled slightly. The work was never done, but that was okay.